Conceptual intuition is used after we act to discover the reason, the ideal content, for taking action. Conceptual intuition can also be used before we act to determine the reason for our action. If the conceptual intuition of my act of will occurs before the perceptible action, then the content of what I do is determined by my idea. In other words, if my intention is determined by an experience of conceptual intuition, then we can say that my will was determined by my idea. The reason why I select from the number of possible intuitions just this special one cannot be sought in a perceptual object, but is to be found rather in the purely ideal interdependence of the members of my system of concepts. In other words, the determining factors for my will are to be found not in the perceptual, but only in the conceptual world. When the ideal content of my act of will is determined purely by my conceptual system, then we can say that my will is determined by my idea. The conceptual system that corresponds to the external world is conditioned by this external world. As we previously discussed, the concept tree is conditioned by the percept tree. In dealing with the external world, we must determine from the percept itself what concept corresponds to it. How this concept will fit in with the rest of my system of ideas depends on its intuitive content. The percept thus conditions directly its concept and thereby indirectly also its place in the conceptual system of my world. But the ideal content of an act of will, which is drawn from the conceptual system and which precedes the act of will, is determined only by the conceptual system itself. An act of will that depends on nothing but this ideal content must itself be regarded as ideal, that is, as determined by an idea. This does not imply, of course, that all acts of will are determined only by ideas. All factors which determine the human individual have an influence on his will.